Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. There's a line of argumentation that has spilled out beyond the Euthyphro, the dialogue that Plato actually wrote, and the lines of argumentation contained there that Socrates elaborates in response to Euthyphro's dictum that the holy is what the gods love or what pleases the gods. And it's called the Euthyphro dilemma. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in contemporary terms towards the end of this video. First, though, what I want to do, since this is a video about core concepts in Plato, is talk about how the dilemma is actually framed in the dialogue, the Euthyphro, which is a little bit different than what a lot of people make of it. You notice that the language here is of the gods, not of God, which is what usually gets talked about in terms of the Euthyphro dilemma today. And it's coming out of an attempt to define what the holy is. Euthyphro is about to go to court and is himself being told that he's impious, that he's unholy because he's prosecuting his father. He wants to say that he actually knows what holiness is. Socrates says, that's great, tell me what it is. They go through a little bit of fencing at the beginning, in typical Socratic style, and then Euthyphro says, well, look, it's what is pleasing to the gods. Is it what's pleasing to all the gods? Sure, now we've got some sort of consensus we can work with. So Socrates then raises a key question, and we can frame that key question like this. What is the actual order of cause and effect if we're thinking about these two qualities of being loved or approved by the gods or pleasing to the gods? And those all get lumped in at the start in one sort of batch. And then being pious, being holy, being something, in that moral value range of the holy. So why is he asking about the order of causality here? Or what is he asking about when he's asking about the order of causality? He's saying, what makes the other thing be what it is? What determines? Which thing is the determining? Which one is the determined? And here's where the actual dilemma comes up. He says, is it this way or is it this way? A dilemma means that you're given this option, you got to pick one of them, and neither one is actually going to give you what you want. So is it that the holy is loved by the gods, so what is pious, what is holy, has that quality of being loved by the gods because it is holy, because there's something intrinsically valuable or good about it. So let's think this through a little bit. What this would mean would be the gods recognize that some action is a good action, or conversely, the gods recognize some action as an intrinsically bad action, and therefore they say, don't do that. For example, giving hospitality to strangers. Zeus in Greek mythology was known as the guardian of travelers, the guardian of strangers. Why? Well, because the gods are pleased by those who, instead of taking advantage of strangers, actually show them hospitality. This is a very important value in ancient Greece, one that's also observed by many other cultures as well. So something is holy, something is valuable, in this case taking in strangers and treating them well. the gods love it, and now we know that's the sort of thing that we ought to do. We ought to do what the gods like us to do, the sort of things that the gods approve of. Hercules has to go kill monsters that are tearing up the countryside and killing all sorts of people. The gods are like, yeah, that's great. Now we know it's a holy act, but it's not a holy act just because the gods, cheered for it. It was a good act, and then the gods are pleased by that. So there's a holiness, there's an intrinsic value there beforehand. That's the cause, and it being loved is the effect. So that's one possibility. Another possibility, Socrates says, is, look, maybe it's that the holy is loved by the gods because they love it. Now this one sounds a little bit strange. They love it because they love it. What he's saying there is that their loving it is what makes it holy. So, for example, the Greek gods liked sacrifices, and we read Homer and we see them talking about, burning this portion of the meat and the flavors, and scent goes up to the gods. And you could say, well, what the hell do the gods need with that sort of thing? Maybe they really like the smell. In that case, it would be the first time. But let's say the gods just say, this is a good thing for people to do. We declare from now on that you should sacrifice this on this sort of occasion. The gods love it, and they're loving it, not because it has any intrinsic great qualities of its own, but they just happen to feel that way. That's what makes it the thing that they love, and because they love it, it now becomes that which a pious person, that which a person who's aligned themselves with the religion, it's good for them. It's good in that sense. So there's a big difference between these two. And Socrates goes a little bit further, and here the argumentation gets really confusing to a lot of people, myself included. So I actually charted it out a little bit and then wrote this kind of strange formula at the bottom. We'll talk about it. Socrates says, is it this way or is it this way? Is it that because something is holy, that something is loved by the gods? Because then that would mean that something being pleasing to the gods makes it loved by the gods. You may say, well, what does that get us? Well, let's just think it out a little bit. So something being holy means that it's loved by the gods. He's saying, because of that, there's another because relation here. Because it's pleasing to the gods, it's loved by the gods. He does another sort of two-step like that and says it could be this way. Something is loved by the gods, so therefore it pleases the gods. And then because it's loved by the gods, that's what makes it holy. And you might say he's just repeating what's going on up here, and that's partly true, but he's also inserting a third term. Now he's juggling three balls in the air, right? Loved by the gods, pleasing to the gods, and is holy, and there's another term over here, is, and because, right? The way he puts it when he's summarizing it, just before he's going to criticize Euthyphro, you notice I've got these sort to be's in parentheses. That's because we're only going to use one at a time. So he's saying, is it this way, that because something is the sort of thing to be loved, that's why it's loved? Where this arrow is the because relation. Because it's the sort of thing to be loved, it's a lovable thing, that's why it's loved? Or is it that first the thing is loved, and because it is loved, it's now identified as the sort of thing to be loved? And you might say, well, that doesn't make any sense. But then again, think about the way in which we actually do acquire many of our desires and preferences and loves and hates. You don't realize that you want something quite often until somebody else, says, hey, I want that, I like that. And then you try it and you're like, oh, this is pretty good. Unfortunately, many of our vices are that way. I can speak with personal experience about smoking, tobacco, and drinking alcohol, even particular alcoholic beverages. For example, when I was a kid, my parents smoked, and so did my grandfather who was living with us. And I said I would never smoke because it smelled so bad and all that. And I could tell that they really enjoyed it. So it was the sort of thing to be loved, right? Just not by me. And then, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but when I was working in a restaurant, I was about 17, I started smoking. I said, let me have one of those cigarettes, and I tried it. And I really enjoyed that constricting feeling in your lungs and the charge that came with it. I even started to like, at first I didn't like the taste, then I did like the taste. So because something is loved, it becomes the sort of thing to be loved. Or, you're probably all familiar with somebody doesn't really desire another person until they become jealous because somebody else desires that person. The person is revealed as something to be loved, and now suddenly you want them. Okay, so those are the kind of examples that could actually make sense here. Do those make sense in the context of theology? Perhaps not quite so much. But the way that we could parse this out is, look, the gods love some things, so therefore now we can see those are the sorts of things to be loved. They're that's what makes them holy. And now if we want to reframe the Euthyphro dilemma in the way that it's used in atheist polemics today against monotheistic religions, it's usually formulated in terms not of the holy, but in terms of the morally good. And the question is whether something is morally good because God says it's so, or does God say that it's morally good because it already is morally good? And so the two terms of the dilemma work more or less like this. Something is morally good because God declares it to be morally good. Otherwise, it wouldn't be morally good. Or, we could do the same thing. Something is morally evil because God says, I don't like this, don't do that. And then because God does that, that's what actually makes it morally good or morally bad. That's what, it doesn't just give us an index of it, it's actually ontologically making it so. It's causality. The other option would be that God merely recognizes the moral goodness of something and then says, for example, honor thy father and thy mother, right? It's a good thing to do ahead of time. God doesn't make it a good thing. God just sort of ratifies it or endorses it or tells us, hey, dummies, pay attention to this, right? Because, we're often going to be hard-headed. So, is it that the good necessitates God in a certain way? Or is it that God necessitates the good? Or we could use the word determine, or we could talk about causality. And both terms of the dilemma are supposed to be bad for the theist. For the Christian, the Muslim, the Jew, even, other, you could conceive of other religions that this would be a problem for as well. Why is this a problem? Well, because you don't want to say that morality is just a matter of God arbitrarily deciding that this is good and this is bad, because then that makes God look like a voluntaristic tyrant who's totally arbitrary and could have decided otherwise, right? So that doesn't look good. Although some religious people say that's fine. I'll take that. Not too many though. The other option is to say God is sort of otios. God doesn't matter in this equation. Maybe God tells us that something is good or something is bad, but we could have figured that out on our own, independent of God. So just take God out of the picture anyway, because something is good, just good, and that's what makes it good. It is good, and God saying so or God liking it, that doesn't add anything to the process. Theist isn't supposed to like that either. There are other alternatives. You don't necessarily have to grab one horn of the dilemma. I don't want to talk about that here. I'm not going to go into that in depth in the comments because I'm mostly interested in Plato's formulation of the Euthyphro dilemma. Interestingly, Euthyphro is perfectly willing, and Socrates is perfectly willing, to grab that second horn of the dilemma and say, yeah, the pious or the holy really is holy because there's something good about it, and the gods recognize that, and so that's what makes it holy. Socrates' problem here, the whole dilemma here, is not supposed to be an anti-theist polemic, the way it got turned into. It's actually leading to the point where Socrates says, this equation that you're giving me, this definition, the holy is what the gods love or approve, that's not helping me here, because all you've done is tell me a quality of the holy. You haven't actually told me what the holy in fact is. That's where he's trying to lead to in the dilemma. And he successfully convinces Euthyphro that he hasn't actually revealed to him what the essence of holiness is.